Tup, tiffle, miffer, sniffle, tipper, tipper, chickers. What's happening? Friday night fish fry. Friday night fish fry. What's happening? This is what's happening. After having COVID for fucking 2 months. Anyway, this is an A100. This is a Leslie 142. No big deal. I've been using them recording for a long time. You gotta keep growing. So, I happened upon a Peavey 412 cabinet. Right, a Slant 412, which is like a Marshall. 412 is a guitar cabinet, right? And usually they do a double stack with a 412 and a 412 sitting on top of the slanted one. And this is Marshall. This was the grunge sound in the 90s. In Seattle was two 412 cabinets. So I found this at Cash Converters for 120 bucks. It's a Peavey, but so what? It's very solidly built. Sorry, I can't show it because my good camera is mounted on the wall, which gives me good video as opposed to the other two Logitech webcams, which I've been using them and they're blurry and they're not very good. But this one is mounted on the wall because it gives a good view of the organ. So the 412 cabinet is right here, Slant Peavey, and it has what are called Sheffield speakers, which are just a Peavey brand of eminence. And this is a pretty old cabinet, and the concept of it is old school rock and roll. So I did quite a fair amount of A-Bing on the internet of people with these Sheffield Peavey speakers compared to a Celestian or an Eminence. And initially people dogged the hell out of these Sheffield speakers. But I knew that they had some purpose, there was some concept behind those. So I listened to a handful of videos of people A-Bing, and as it turns out, the Sheffields, which are what I have 412s, they're really Peaveys, but they're made by Eminence, and Peavey brands them Sheffield, which is basically to get the Vox British rock and roll sound, which is very different than the Celestian and the Eminence Marshall. So when the guys would A-B back and forth, the Sheffields are much more open with treble and bass and transparent. And as soon as you plug the Eminence in, it's all dedicated mid-range, saturation. I don't like those at all. So I said, man, this was a good find. Okay, so you get the cabinet. A 412 can be run in stereo, two jacks in the back. You can run two 12s and two 12s off of each jack in stereo and use a normal PA head. I think that it's 8 ohms. Usually when you have two 12s, it's 4 ohms. But it may be that, I don't know. I think it's 8, but I plugged my Peavey Deca 1200 power amp stereo into this 412 cab, and it sounded great. But the cool thing is, you can also run the 412 cabinet mono. So you flip the switch on the back, and it runs all 4 speakers, but the key is it's 16 ohms. Not 8, not 4, not 2, which is what, when you add speakers on to your PA, it goes down the more speakers you add. So when you have 2 on the side of a stereo amp, they're in 4 ohms, but it's more powerful and it's louder and it's better, right? So you're best to run 2 speakers and a power amp on the side. Anyway, at 412, when you run it in mono, all 4 speakers, it's 16. I didn't know this. And evidently, most guitar heads that these demon guitar players use are 16 ohms. So there's something to that, the load of 16. So I said, oh well, isn't that interesting? Because it just so happens that the output of the Leslie 122 is 16 ohms. So in the Leslie, this used to be a 145. So it had a 147 amp in it, which is unbalanced, and I put a 122 amp in it, which means that it's balanced coming off of the tone generator, balanced input. But the Alnico 15-inch speaker in the bottom is rated at 16 ohms. That's really weird, right? It's very unique and unusual. I think it's in basically the guitar world. But anyway, when you put a 15 in your Leslie, you need to make sure that it's 16 ohms, which is unusual because most of the 15s that you buy today are going to be 8 ohms, which is the case in my Ampeg bass amp, where I replaced its 15-inch speaker Ampeg with an Eminence, and it was 8 ohms. So here the Alnico is 16 ohms, and the V21 Jensen upper horn also is 16 ohms. So the Leslie 122 tube amplifier outputs 16 ohms, which is what the 412 cabinet takes. And I went, well, there you go. I don't have a tube amp. I don't play guitar. I play the organ, but wouldn't it be cool to have a tube amp that isn't replete with a zipper or a spinner or a Leslie spinning system just to hear the straight sound? Well, wouldn't that be different? Because there are recordings of the Hammond organ, such as Ray Charles, who before the Leslie was caught on and people learned how to use it, they used the straight sound of the organ. But now, of course, this A100 has an amp built into the console, and 212s are built underneath. So it's running 212s down there, but they're under here, right? And it's basically for the player. So that's not going to do you. You could mic those up, and the internal amp on the A100 is tweaked for the bass pedals, right? So, okay, well, so let's see what that sounds like. Here we are. And it's Friday Night Fish Fry, so my console is microphonic. And what does that mean? That means that my amps, the tubes, are picking up live sound. So when I tap the console of the wood cabinet of the organ, it's live and being amplified, which is not the way that it's supposed to be. But that's because I have electrical phenomena. I have an arc in the ear that's causing my organ to be microphonic. And is giving you this sound. Here's straight G, but listen to what's happening to that F. Some people say that's not crosstalk. Anyway, so here is the internal amp of the A100, which I have rebuilt that amp, Marcus Spears, and they're 212s, which I think may be Roland's, in the organ. Now, this is a new mic setup because I'm intending to demo the 412 cabinet. So it's here, up against the wall. So my 2XY pair is here, and the 212s are in the console. So these mics are not going to pick up these 212s very well. But there's a fair amount of low end because the internal amp in the Hammond is tweaked because it knows you're going to be playing bass. Although it's not much here. There's plenty of a bottom here to play left-hand bass with the internal amp. So no big deal. I run the internal speakers with the Leslie 142. Why not? Because it just makes everything fuller. And the cool thing is when you use the internal amp on the organ, it sends signal to a separate reverb amp, which is over here in the tank, and I have that reverb coming out of this 12-inch speaker. So okay for the organist. But if you're in a recording studio or you're in a rock band, that doesn't work. One is because you don't have nearly enough volume. You don't have any projection because the sound is coming out down here. You need external amplification, right? And most people, when the Hammond first came out, there was a variety of tone cabinets that Hammond made that people used, including the ballparks, right? So these, I don't have one of these. I've never had one of these Hammond tone cabinets, but it's just a bunch of 12s and a tube amp and an open enclosure. And, well, isn't that kind of cool? That's kind of lost art. You don't really hear those anymore. People have them. Collectors have those in their homes, but they certainly don't take them out, right? So this 412 basically is mimicking, you know, an original Hammond tone cabinet because it's using the tube amp and it has 412s, although the difference being that it's sealed. It is a sealed cabinet. It's not open, so those Hammond tone cabinets, the sound goes all over the place because the back is open, right? So the 412 is directional and helps you direct the sound of what usually is the guitar, right? So here is the operative difference, right? Is take the reverb off. Console. And now I'm going to route the organ, turn the console off. I'm going to route it to the 142, which normally would be a 15 and a horn. And that has been unplugged, and now that 122 tube amp, which is only 40 watts, is triggering this 412 Peavey guitar cabinet with Sheffield speakers, and that's being mic'd up with this XY pair, right? So, console. 412. First of all, much more volume. Clear, full. Turn the Vibrato scanner on. You hear, wow, now that is a sound. And I will further augment that, like most purist Hammond players rip the guts out of the A100 and don't use the internals. I'm going to turn the console speakers on, which also turns the reverb on, and play all of that together, right? There's something interesting with that straight sound with no reverb. And the scanner adds all of that key click. I like the sound straight out of the 412s. Yeah, and by the way, I have a hard time getting this. Anyway, this was a great success. My Prophet synthesizer sat in the garage all summer in that heat and humidity, and now it has a bunch of notes out, including C sharp. So it's unplayable. So I'm triggering it with this KX5. And it and the Rhodes, the 54 behind me, has a new Retro Flyer preamp in it. So this 54 has been completely rebuilt, refurbished, with new clean tines and tone bars. Didn't need hammer tips, but completely rebuilt, and it plays just like a normal Mark II 1981 Rhodes upstairs. This is a great little piano, and that preamp made a big difference. It has the original sliders that came with the 54. So the 54 and the Prophet are going through a little Peavey mixer and into the RCA jack and the console of the A100, so that they're coming out what normally would be through the Leslie. Now they're coming out also through the 412 cabinet. And the way that this is set, that's just a 412. That's the console 12, 212s. And that's both of them together. So this was a fair amount of work. I had to make a custom speaker cable to go out of the 122 amp into the 412. So that meant a little vintage Amphenol connector, which I had to order from a specialty keyboard place in California. They came yesterday. They're mil-spec connectors, and I had to buy a speaker cable today, which cost $22 for a little 6-foot speaker cable, but it's 14 gauge wire, very shielded, and then snip it and put the Amphenol connector on, which plugs into the 122, and then goes over and plugs 1/4 inch into the Peavey 412. And I was successful. So now you have another Hammond sound that you can use at your disposal on your next great hit recording of anybody that really wants to use real Hammond. So this is down the Rightly Rhodes organ webinar. Yeah. Meanwhile, my COVID rack body is doing the best that it can to hang in there, so I apologize for my unkempt appearance and depressed health. Peace.